This week's episode of the ArtTactic Podcast is brought to you by Hangman Fine Art Services. As an art advisor and collector myself, I often get asked how I handle the complex process of acquiring new works. Many folks express frustration about poor communication and inconsistent service from their art handlers and art shippers. So that's why I always recommend Hangman. Working with Hangman puts the joy back into art collecting by allowing you to focus on finding the perfect placement for each work in your collection, or even on your next great acquisition. Hangman provides best-in-class fine art services from its full-service facilities in New York City, the Hamptons, Los Angeles, and Miami. And Hangman also offers a robust network of countrywide fine art shuttles, including a weekly shuttle between New York and Los Angeles. As a client myself, I can confidently say that Hangman delivers innovative solutions at unbeatable rates. To learn more about Hangman, visit www.hangmannyc.com, and you can also find Hangman on Instagram at HangmanFineArts. Thanks for listening to the ArtTactic Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Green. It was so great seeing so many of you at Art Basel this last week in Switzerland. And for those who haven't experienced the fair, I highly recommend it. I think it's my favorite fair of the year. And for good reason. The quality of the art's unparalleled, and there's something about the city's layout, the close proximity of museums, galleries, and the convention center. It feels like the art world truly takes over the town, and you encounter familiar faces, not just at the fair, but in the streets, in the museums, and even restaurants. You really feel the art world and the community while you're there. Heading into this year's fair, there was some uncertainty about where the art market stood. Galleries, I think, were understandably nervous about sales. But the energy at the convention center was positive. Artists presented exceptional works, and galleries overall seemed pleased with the outcome. In this week's episode of the podcast, we're joined by Carlie Porterfield, the Associate Art Market Editor at the Art Newspaper. Carlie was in Basel as well, and wrote several articles covering the fair for the Art Newspaper. She's here to help us recap this year's edition. Thanks so much for listening. Carlie, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we really appreciate you joining us. I think to fully digest what occurred at Art Basel this year, we actually need to begin by talking about the lead up to the fair, which is not necessarily something we always do on the podcast. But tell us, what was the mood of the market and the level of uncertainty heading into this year's Art Basel?
Sure. Well, I don't think the mood was particularly optimistic going into the fair. One kind of way to gauge the market is the May sales at the New York auction houses, maybe like a month before Basel, at least at the market at the highest levels. And this year, those sales didn't really go so well. There are a few standout lots, like, for example, at Sotheby's had a really great Leonora Carrington painting sell for a record amount. And there was the Rosa de la Cruz collection at Christie's. And Phillips had a few great Basquiat paintings, but besides that, we didn't really have the blowout collections that we've seen at previous years. And there was also some general uneasiness surrounding the Christie's website hack that there's been a lot of coverage of. So I think that in general, people are just a little bit kind of uneasy about the market in general. That's one thing I kept hearing the days leading up to the fair in Basel.
Yeah, and on a somewhat related note, a common observation exhibiting galleries shared with me was a noticeable absence of many American collectors and advisors at this edition of Art Basel. I'm wondering, did you hear that similar sentiment, and do you think that was related to market conditions or maybe some other factors?
That is something that I kept hearing. I also just noticed some of kind of the higher profile collectors and art advisors, just art world figures, like you said, just seemed to stay home during this fair for whatever thing that might be. They had other events to go to. But some of the Americans that I did see at Basel when I was talking to kind of expressed interest in the newly renamed Art Basel Paris. I think for whatever reason, that fair does kind of seem to more appealing for Americans, maybe because it can be combined with a trip to London for freeze. That Eurostar trip is much easier than getting to Basel for a lot of people. Maybe Paris as a destination is more attractive for Americans in terms of like restaurants you can go to, maybe Paris is just more attractive. So I did hear some speculation that maybe some Americans are choosing or in the future will choose to go to Paris over Basel. But that's just speculation that I heard from some Americans.
Yeah, I heard some of that as well, and I think that makes sense. If you're a collector, if you're not someone working in the industry, I can see the appeal of Paris, of course. I mean, it's Paris, so you can go to the fair, see some of the galleries there, and then also enjoy the city of Paris. But I do think Basel is a very special place and a really unbelievable experience, and I don't think it's going anywhere. And it's also funny you touched on Art Basel Paris, well, being renamed Art Basel Paris. I didn't realize that till someone told me last week at the fair, but I had just finally gotten Perry Plu in my vocabulary, and now I have to go back to Basel Paris, which is pretty funny. But anyways, so yeah, let's talk a little bit about Art Basel and the actual fair and how it went. Tell us, what was the mood at the fair in comparison to some of the pre-fair expectations that we were discussing?
I think it really depends who you talk to. I think there was a lot of pleasant surprise among the dealers, especially when you think about like kind of the higher level sales among the mega dealers. There were definitely more 8-figure sales during the first preview day than I know I was expecting. A lot of these big international dealers reported just, these crazy like auction figure prices. And I think that kind of helped dispel some of the nervousness that was kind of going into the fair. So that was great to see. But I do think that there's a real sense of unease in some segments of the market that those huge sales numbers don't necessarily reflect, especially among, smaller galleries or maybe even the private secondary market. My colleague Tim wrote a column about it last week. And some of the sales at the smaller kind of, I guess you could call them auxiliary fairs, like secondary to the Art Basel fair, weren't as strong this year. I think people have been saying this for a long time now, but definitely the post-COVID frothiness is over. And I think that there is a bright side to that. It's that this is definitely a buyer's market now. I did speak to some collectors at Basel who said for the first time they're actually able to like buy works from galleries who haven't really been in contact with them for a while. It seems like a lot of the speculators who have been there the past few years are gone, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that's led to collectors in a lot of cases being able to take their time and make better decisions about their collections. So if we drill down into the actual art on view, what were some of the most noteworthy sales at this edition of the fair?
The largest reported sale was a Joan Mitchell diptych that David Zwirner sold for $20 million, and that's just kind of, I was really surprised by that. That was just like a huge figure. And then Hauser and Wirth also sold an untitled Gorky painting from the 40s for $16 million, which is obviously huge. It seemed like Hauser and Wirth, obviously being sort of like the hometown Swiss heroes of the fair, really sold a lot. And then David Zwirner also made out like a bandit at this fair.
And so a big part of the week is not just the actual art fair, but also some of the attractions outside of the convention center, including some gallery shows. A lot of the museum exhibitions are quite noteworthy. What were some of the exhibitions around the city that you think received the most attention from visitors?
The one I heard the most about was the When We See Us show at the Kunstmuseum in Basel. It was dedicated to Black figurative painting. That one was getting a lot of attention. I heard such great things about it. I think it was originally from a museum in Cape Town, and everyone was talking about that one. Unfortunately, I was at the fair all week long, and the only place that I actually made it out to was the Foundation Baylor's summer show. They just have gorgeous grounds out there. It's really cool. They had a really cool contemporary kind of installations that when you'd be walking around, suddenly you see like cool smoke or hear weird noises. And I really enjoyed that a lot the one time I was able to leave the fair.
Yeah, the Byler, in my view, was the most polarizing museum exhibition of the week. And for our listeners who aren't in Basel, I'm sure you did see some of it on others' Instagram stories. That would be the exhibition in which art handlers, during opening hours, We're taking paintings off of walls and moving them around to different walls. So during the fair, a dealer actually sent me a text message who wasn't there. They had read a lot of the positive coverage of the fair from, for example, your writings in the art newspaper as well as others. And they sent me a text saying, what do we make of the market now? Is the market hot now? Is it strong? It seems like there was positive energy at the fair. What can we take away from this? I'm curious, what do you think we can extrapolate from Art Basel, and what can we not take away when we try to assess where the market stands after this fair?
Yeah, I wish we could draw a really concrete conclusion from an art fair. It would definitely make my job as an art reporter much easier. But I think it's difficult too. I mean, this is kind of the art fair, so it's natural that dealers will bring their best work and really hammer hard on pre-sales. And obviously, collectors are coming to this fair to buy. But it is such a complicated industry. I wouldn't say that it's all roses and sunflowers going forward. Because we definitely did hear from especially smaller galleries that they are having a hard time selling. I mean, there's still definitely real unease among some segments of the industry. So I definitely don't think that the entire industry is in the clear yet. But I definitely hope that the success that we did see, I do hope that it's a sign that we'll be okay. And when it comes to the events coming up in the future.
And speaking of that, we do now enter a slower phase of the art market as we're approaching the summer, and Art Basel is now concluded. As a art market reporter, are there one or a few events that you'll be looking at to try to gauge how the market's doing during the summer?
One thing that I wish I was attending, but unfortunately I'm not, but I'm always fascinated by is Tokyo Gendai returning to Japan in July. I'm fascinated by the Asian market and Japan in particular, so I always like to see what's going on with that fair and just kind of how that market is doing.
Yeah, I hear you there. I'd love to have an excuse to go back to Japan. Carlie, thanks so much again for joining us on the podcast and helping us recap this year's edition of Art Basel. If our listeners haven't already, they should definitely check out all of your coverage in the art newspaper. And you're also on social media, often talking about the art market and the art world. Where can we find you there?
You can follow me on Instagram at Porterfield.
Perfect. Thanks so much again, Carlie. Appreciate it.
Yeah, perfect. Talk soon. Bye.
This week's episode of the ArtTactic Podcast is brought to you by Hangman Fine Art Services. As an art advisor and collector myself, I often get asked how I handle the complex process of acquiring new works. Many folks express frustration about poor communication and inconsistent service from their art handlers and art shippers. So that's why I always recommend Hangman. Working with Hangman puts the joy back into art collecting by allowing you to focus on finding the perfect placement for each work in your collection, or even on your next great acquisition. Hangman provides best-in-class fine art services from its full-service facilities in New York City, the Hamptons, Los Angeles, and Miami. And Hangman also offers a robust network of countrywide fine art shuttles, including a weekly shuttle between New York and Los Angeles. As a client myself, I can confidently say that Hangman delivers innovative solutions at unbeatable rates. To learn more about Hangman, visit www.hangmannyc.com, and you can also find Hangman on Instagram at Hangman Fine Arts.